Well, it looks like the launch window lineups and beyond for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X might actually be worse than for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. I don't know if you guys remember the launch windows for the current gen, but I do, and it was pretty dire. The PlayStation basically got nothing that was worth writing home about at least, and the Xbox wasn't much better. In fact, for the first 2 years of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, it could be argued that you'd have been better off sticking with the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, as the games were cheaper and there were more of them. Maybe Don Matrick was right and they did have a Xbox for people who weren't online. Maybe people should have stuck with the 360. But anyway, let's get on with it. I remember arguments raging back then about which console had the better lineup. I even made a video about it myself and probably spieled a lot of nonsense about the Xbox having the better games, despite the fact that neither console could claim that. Both consoles were, as I say, pretty dire. The PlayStation 4 did go on to produce a whole raft of great games from around about 2017, starting with Horizon Zero Dawn, but before then, well, it was all pretty quiet. And yeah, I know that Bloodborne came out in 2015, but that was, well, one highly rated game in a sea of what can only really be described as mediocrity. As my mate put it at the time, I hardly turn on my PlayStation 4, there's nothing to play. And it was equally true of the Xbox. Fast forward to now though, and the next generation is fast approaching with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X due to be released later this year, in case you were living under a rock and hadn't realised. And I have to wonder if things are going to be any better. We've already had the whole hoo-ha about the Xbox not having exclusives for the Series X for the first 2 years, but well, that was something and nothing, and I've already made a video about it, so I'm not going to talk about it here too much. What's more concerning is the events surrounding game production, which none of us can control and which could be impacting game development. And when I say none of us can control, I mean the developers. And of course I'm talking about COVID-19. Now, it doesn't matter when a game's due for release, there will always be unforeseen factors that can come into play that might cause hold-ups. And, we've seen it time and time again where a game is slated for release and then has to be delayed. And it's no different anywhere else. I remember a quote from Douglas Adams where he said, "I love deadlines. I like the whooshing sounds they make as they fly by." Of course, Adams was being flippant, but the point is that artistic endeavours can't be forced. And when you have a massive team of people working on something, well, there are so many factors at play that you simply can't plan for every eventuality. And so we have COVID-19, an eventuality that I'm sure no developer had on their radar a year ago, though some virologists did, but that's another video entirely. We've all had to change our habits as a result of this virus. Well, most of us have. There are some nuts out there who refuse to see sense, and I've actually made a video about that. But the reality is that the gaming industry is no different in that sense from any industry, in the sense that, well, most people will be working from home now. Of course, that in itself brings some limitations, some of which, if I'm being honest, never occurred to me. And that brings me back to the point about the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X launch windows. In an interview with Business Insider a week or so ago, Phil Spencer laid out some of the problems developers were having in specific areas of development. He mentioned 2 areas in particular that had been hit: motion capture or mocap and the creation of musical scores using orchestras. Now, obviously, if you think about it, that's because both of those areas require people to come together to work and create. And you can't do that if you're having to social distance or work from home. And this is what Phil Spencer said. Mocap is just something that's basically stopped. We're not going into mocap studios. If you had all your animation captured and you're doing touch-up in more individual art production and in areas like textures and other things, you're in a better position. If you're waiting for a lot of either large audio work, when it's with symphonies and other things, or mocap, you're held up right now. And this isn't going to be any different for any other company putting out games in the next year or so. Spencer also says, through the summer, early fall, I feel pretty good about those games. Games that we're targeting a year from now or beyond, there'll be some impact, but they'll be able to react. Now, obviously, how much they'll be able to react is open to speculation. But like it or not, there's going to be an impact on the release windows of any games that are held up because the work simply can't be done. And there will be a knock-on effect for months and possibly years. As an aside, I do wonder how that's going to impact crunch in the industry, and I worry that it might actually make it a lot worse as studios scrabble to get their games out once everything's starting to approach normal, whenever that might be. I hope not, but I wouldn't bet against it. Coming back to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X though, we also have to realise that launch windows for new consoles are often pretty lacking for games in the first place, as evidenced by the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. If we don't get many games in the initial release period for the new consoles, which, well, is likely, and then the second and possibly third wave of games are held up due to COVID-19, then forget 2 years. We could actually be looking well into the future before it becomes truly worthwhile to buy a next-gen console. That's the way I see it anyway. I mean, was it really worth buying a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One in the first 2 years? I'm honestly not sure that it was. And some people would argue that it was never worth buying an Xbox One, although I would take umbrage with that. But, you know, the reality is that we could end up with a situation where there aren't very many games at all coming out for the next-gen consoles. And what games there are, aside from a handful, well, they're going to be cross-gen titles anyway. And this is going to be worse than ever. And, you know, you guys might disagree with me. And if you do, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe and, as I say, comment. And if you get the time, share this video on social media. It'll be doing me a massive favour and it'll only cost you a moment of your time. So, yeah, if you could do that, that'd be great. And that's me done with the shilling for the day. Right, I'm off to get a cup of tea and I'll speak to you guys in the next one. Bye.